Good morning, Garland Nixon here with Laith Marouf. He's live in Beirut, Lebanon. There's a lot going on in the Middle East, and we're going to get some wisdom from the great Laith Marouf. Let's talk. Hey, Garland here, and it is Wednesday morning. There's lots going on, and we've got Laith Marouf. Don't forget, Laith has a website. He has a project that's working to bring very good information, timely information from what's happening on the siege in Gaza. It's called freepalestine.video. You can go to freepalestine.video. Please, they need help as far as donations. They need funding and finances. You guys know how that is. They've been harassed by, the imperialists and the government and you name it. So freepalestine.video. Let's try to keep the good work going. Laith, welcome back to my humble YouTube channel.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Before we get started on what's going on in the region, George Galloway, very interesting dynamic there. One thing that we've seen, the thing that struck me after that was Rishi Sunak basically saying, there's a problem with this. There's extremism. Well, wait a minute. The man got more votes than the Tories, the Labour, the Independent combined. But it's extremism. So now extremism to the ruling elites is the will of the people who are saying, we're not supporting World War III in Ukraine. We're not supporting genocide in Gaza. We're not supporting these immoral ruling elites. Your thoughts on the implications of the Galloway victory in Rochdale?
Well, I cracked up when I saw Rishi Sunak practically come out with his pajama at the end of the night. Not waiting even for the morning to have that press conference, his first and only press conference in front of Downing Street number 10 because of Galloway's election. And of course, as you said, apparently democracy is anti-democratic. The election of somebody is a threat to democracy. And but I've said this on your show before. We are moving right now in the West towards the total destruction of the theatrical rights that people had before. We already lost the right to speak, the right to independent media. We're basically almost losing now the right to demonstrate and to gather in public in opposition to government's positions, whether that's happening in Canada or in the UK, as we saw Rishi Sunak hint to the possibility of banning these demonstrations for Palestine. And now it seems like we're at the edge of possibly losing the right to vote or elect people that we wish to elect. And I say this should ring alarm bells in the minds of people that live in the West, in Canada and the US and Europe, especially for the US, with the elections coming up in November. We look at the war in Palestine, that it's now at the edge of expanding to encompass Lebanon and Syria and Iraq. And when that happens, and when we see thousands or hundreds of American and Canadian soldiers coming back in coffins, what would happen really in the streets of these countries? If already we have millions of people out in the streets because of the war in Gaza, what if it's a whole regional war with 4 or 5 countries and direct involvement, not only hidden involvement of the US and Canada and the West, but direct involvement in this war? Definitely there will be tens of millions of people out in the streets. How is the state the governments in these countries going to deal with these demonstrators? How are they, if we already can see Galloway winning an overwhelming vote, against all of the traditional parties combined, couldn't have enough vote for him just because of the war in Gaza. We are looking at Biden receiving so uncommitted votes, even in the yesterday's 15 state elections, the Super Tuesday, as it's called in the U.S. Is there a possibility where Biden sees that he's not going to get elected, that maybe even third parties like Cornel West or what's her name from the Green Party could have a bigger chance, or their candidates could have bigger chances? Are we going to have elections suspended? And remember, the United Kingdom suspended elections during all of World War II. Okay, so there is precedent before in the West of suspension of electoral rights. And if there is a regional war that includes all these countries, and the US declares national emergency, or Canada declares martial law, or what have you, there is a big chance that people lose that right to vote also. So I see Galloway's election, on the one hand, proving to us that the public in these countries want a different choice, that the vast majority of human beings are decent, no matter what's their background religiously or culturally or linguistically. Most people don't want a genocide to be committed in their name. Therefore, there is a big chance for third voices or new voices to emerge. And that, on the other hand, now this is increasing the possibility of more rights being suspended to forfeit the voice of the people from reaching power.
Let's talk about some of the various things going on. I'm going to hit a couple, of the most important points in the region, and get your thoughts on it. The Red Sea. The U.S., if you remember in the very beginning, the U.S. started bombing Yemen, and they asked Joe Biden, is it going to make a difference? Will it stop Yemen? He said, no. Are you going to keep doing it? Yes. I'm reading now that Yemen has stepped up their activity, that we know now I saw a picture of a British ship that has sunk. One of the other things that we continually get is the Yemen, the Ansar Allah will say, we hit a British ship, and the U.S. will say, oh, no, they didn't. And then all of a sudden, a British ship goes limping back to England for some kind of repairs of unknown actions. They're claiming they're hitting American ships. The U.S. says, oh, no, never touched us, never laid a glove on us. What do we know about the Red Sea? What's the status of things? What's going on there?
Well, last night, the spokesperson of the Yemeni armed forces, General Saria, said that they hit 2 American destroyers. 2, not 1, 2 American destroyers were targeted and were hit. Up until now, of course, the U.S. is denying it, and we have no visual confirmation of it. But I think Yemen and the armed forces of Yemen have been very truthful in their announcements up until now. So they haven't lied or exaggerated up until now. So I will take their word for that. I think we will hear probably about deaths of American servicemen of overdose in Germany, or corona in Korea in the next few days.
A car accident, we get that sometime. There was an overturned, Jeep or something, and 4 people died, those kind of things.
Yes, so this is how we will hear about those injuries and deaths from American servicemen. They also announced yesterday that they hit an Israeli ship that had camouflaged itself, faked its transponders and its call numbers to make it look like it's not Israelis, and they showed the proof of it, the Yemeni forces. So what we know now is that Yemen and its intelligence capabilities are advanced enough to be able to tell the fakes that are trying to go to Israel while lying, saying they're not, or they're flying a different flag, claiming that they're not Israelis, but the intelligence services of Yemen, it seems to be smart enough to catch this. So, at the same time, last night, the American Air Force bombed Hodeidah in 3 different locations in the Hodeidah port on the Red Sea. This is not doing much to the capabilities of Yemen, and as we see, the Yemeni forces are continuing to attack shipping going to Israel or related to the United States and the UK. We also saw that the Yemeni army, not their navy or air force, have mobilized close to 300,000 people right now over the last month, have been training them in preparation for a possible invasion by the United States and the UK. And that tells you that now, number one, how many people are ready in Yemen to defend their country. Many of these peoples were sitting on the sidelines while the internal war was happening over the 8 past years. Now these people are coming forward and volunteering themselves to defend Yemen against an invasion. And finally, I would say, looking at the internal situation of Yemen, we had all the main highways between the areas occupied by the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Ansarullah northern regions have been opened for the first time in 8 years. That shows you there's now movements and trade within Yemen, and that the Saudis and the Emiratis are trying to do as much as they can to lower the intensity of conflict that they have with Yemen so they don't get caught up in this wider battle that the U.S. is egging for.
Wow. Iraq, I've been reading that the Iraqis are stepping up their moves to eject U.S. imperialism from their territory. What do you know about that?
Yes, yesterday the Iraqi resistance announced that they fired multiple drones on the port of Haifa in occupied Palestine, that they actually hit the airport of Haifa and the power generator, the electricity power generator that feeds the area of Haifa that is outside of the airport of Haifa. So last night, much of the West Galilee region went dark, and it was because the Iraqi drones hit those locations. We also heard of attacks on American positions, but inside Syria, unannounced who is responsible for those attacks, but it's very likely, most likely, it is the Iraqi resistance groups. Inside Iraq, it's been quiet in terms of military confrontation with the American presence there, but the battle has been moved into inside the parliament of Iraq, and there is motions on the table right now in the Iraqi parliament to hasten up the exit of American and other Western troops from the country. And that's where I think the consensus in Iraq is to, for now at least, keep the country not as a direct confrontation between Iraq and the United States until the moment where a wider confrontation happens, and when we're at the tethering right now at that edge.
I was reading, or rather not reading, but I heard this morning some reports that Israel's Golani Brigade had tried to make some moves into Lebanon, that there were fights with Hezbollah, that they were stopped and turned back. People aren't sure whether it was probing what they were trying to do. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, so that was 2 nights ago, and it coincided with the arrival of America's envoy, Hochstein, who's supposed to be negotiating with Hezbollah. And of course, Hochstein is an Israeli citizen also and a former Israeli soldier. He's the one.
And a crook. I've done a lot of work on him. He's a crook. He's a
Yeah.
guy who went, in case you didn't know it, Amos Hochstein is the guy. He was the like an energy czar or whatever in the Obama State Department. As soon as the United States overthrew the country of Ukraine, he did a Hunter Biden. He quit working for the US State Department. He went to Ukraine and he immediately got on the board of directors for Naftogaz, which is the Ukrainian it's the Ukrainian national gas company. He did a Hunter Biden. He filled his filthy pockets 20 days or so before Joe Biden came into, was elected. He quit Naftogaz and he says, oh, there's just too much corruption there. Yeah, well, I guess he's a guy who would know because he was, in fact, the corruption. Then let me add this, and everybody can look this up. Joe Biden brought him in. Guess what his job was? They literally had this in articles. You can find articles. Joe Biden brought Amos Hochstein into the Biden administration, the State Department, to kill the Nord Stream pipeline. And we know, so he was a pipeline bomber. That's why I say about Amos Hochstein, he's filled his filthy, crooked pockets with gas, and there happens to be a lot of gas that the people of Gaza own that should be theirs. And I don't think it's an accident that this shiesty crook who fills his pockets with gas happens to show up in Israel when they're trying to steal all this gas from Gaza and Lebanon. I don't think that's incidental.
Yes, and he negotiated the maritime borders between Lebanon and the Zionist colony last year before the war. So he's definitely has his hand into the filth of smuggling gas and oil and ripping off their profits. So to go back to what was happening, is it seemed like the Israelis wanted to give the impression, as Hochstein was arriving, that if the Hezbollah doesn't take the deal that he's bringing, that they will be attacking. Maybe that's part of why they were trying to do this. So they attempted to infiltrate Lebanon from two different locations. The Golani Brigade had, and the Hezbollah intelligence was able to actually know that they're coming, to spot them as they're coming, and to blow up landmines under them that were laid beforehand, and then target the retreating forces that survived the explosions. So they got minced, basically. Even if it was just a show trying to add pressure on Hezbollah during these negotiations, it actually backfired. It made them look weaker, and made it even clearer that Hezbollah is ready for a bigger fight. Over the last also 24 hours, the Israelis have been bombarding nonstop the villages on the border, the Lebanese villages on the border. They attacked a town called Hula and hit a residential home, killed a mother and a father and their son. And in retaliation, yesterday Hezbollah fired the largest volley of missiles on one target. 60 to 70, people are not sure, but the number is between 60 and 70 missiles fired all at once on Kiryat Shmona, and it hit a residential building, the target, because Hezbollah said openly that it will be an eye for an eye. You kill a civilian, we will kill a civilian. You hit a military target, we will hit a military target. You hit an industrial zone, we will hit an industrial zone. And Hezbollah has been keeping its word. And so to see this huge volley of missiles all coming down on one settlement in the panhandle of Palestine, Kiryat Shmona, this tells you that, of course, in the situation of a wider war that is not tit for tat, an actual full-out war, I think most of the north of Palestine will be carpet bombed by Hezbollah, and there will be nothing left standing for the Israelis to defend honestly. So, and just an hour ago, Hezbollah announced that they fired 3 drones, suicide drones, on a target. We don't know what's the target yet in North Palestine. Most probably, they use these suicide drones on the air defenses that the Israelis have.
I also read that the Hezbollah was hitting the Golan Heights. That they've been focusing more on that with missiles and attacks. Have you heard that?
Oh yes, yes. I mean, if you look at the maps of the targets that they release every day, maps, Hezbollah, of the targets that they hit, and at least a third of the targets that they're concentrating on are in the Golan Heights. And yesterday, by the way, this is on a side note, there was a drone that came in from Syria and hit the Golan Heights. So that tells you that, we don't know who fired this. It could be the Iraqis, it could be Hezbollah from inside Syria, it could be Syrian resistance groups. The point is that the Golan Heights will be a central part of any all-out war as it comes, because of its position being the highest point, vantage point in the area. You cannot do any land invasion or activities on land if you don't have control of the Golan Heights. From the Golan Heights, by the way, just by eyesight, you can see Damascus and you can see Jerusalem. Okay, so it's you could fire a missile with eyesight into Jerusalem or into Damascus from that point. So it will be a central battle zone when the fighting breaks out in a full scale. And if we look at how many, yesterday also Hezbollah released a graphic of all the attacks that they had done since October 7th, and it's close to 1,200 operations. Many of those operations, of course, include tens of missiles or drones, but it's almost like 10 operations a day that they are enacting. And so when we say a third of that has been on the Golan Heights, we're talking about 300, 400 attacks since the beginning of this war. So there's not much really left of the main bases that are visible through satellite or other surveillance that are still standing, not only in the Golan Heights, but in all of north of Palestine. Much of the bases have been destroyed. So what we continue to see right now on a daily basis is that actually the Israeli forces are not sitting in their bases. They are having to sit in forests to hide themselves because their bases are destroyed. And this is making them easier targets for Hezbollah with their ATGM missiles to hit these groupings of soldiers that are hiding under trees or what have you.
I wanted to ask you something else about that. What are we hearing about the fighting in Gaza, about Hamas, about the PIJ, the various resistance groups? Are you getting much information? We were getting a lot of information, a lot of video out of that, out of the actual the West Bank, etc. What do we know about some of the areas inside of occupied Palestine where the fighting is going on with resistant groups there?
Yeah, well, first off, we're looking at the starvation situation in Gaza. We're now at around 18 children dead in the last 24 hours because of dehydration and starvation in the north of Gaza. We also today, Palestinians that were going to a convoy of aid got shot at again. It's become a daily occurrence every time a convoy of aid arrives. The civilians that come to pick that aid get targeted. We had also this morning another airdrop by Western countries, useless airdrop, obviously. And in terms of the fighting, Hamas and Islamic Jihad announced today that they targeted the main base, a gathering base for the Israelis inside Gaza. They showed the videos of the mortars and the sniper fire hitting the soldiers and the tanks situated there. And they hit. There was a building that Israeli soldiers were hiding in the Khan Yunis area. Shooting sniper fire from it on the Palestinian civilians, and that whole building got blown up with the Israeli battalion inside it. There was multiple helicopters that came in to extract the dead and injured. And as they withdrew from that neighborhood, the Israeli military this morning, people went in, and there was, tens of bodies in the street, decomposing bodies, clearly civilians that were targeted by the Israeli forces and left on the ground there. So the fighting continues. In terms of the possibilities of a ceasefire, we keep on hearing from the U.S. saying, "Oh, we're close, we're close." Well, just a few hours ago, again, Hamas made a statement saying we're further away actually from a ceasefire than that we were a week ago, because the Israelis are refusing to agree to the number of prisoners of war to be exchanged. They're also refusing to give written guarantees about the withdrawal from Gaza and or the entry of aid and reconstruction. So ultimately, we are further away from a possibility of a ceasefire. And as we get closer to Ramadan is in 5 days. I think we're even closer right now to a much bigger war that Israel may trigger before Ramadan, and if they don't, it will trigger itself by Ramadan.
What does the bigger war look like, in your opinion?
So right now, let's put ourselves in the position of the Israeli leadership. Okay, if Ramadan, let's say they actually call for a ceasefire, accept a ceasefire, and we're in ceasefire, and then Ramadan starts, and all these Palestinians try to go to the mosque and get beaten up, okay, as has happened every Ramadan and forever. And so what will that mean? That means that there will be an actual uprising inside the West Bank, inside Jerusalem, and inside 1948 territories. The Palestinians that are Israeli citizens, just like 2 years ago, will be out in the streets. And so definitely Israel doesn't want to put itself in that situation. They'd rather have either an all-out war in the region so they can ban any demonstrations or call martial law and round up their own citizens, ban people from entering the mosque, and make the attention of the world away from what's going to happen in the Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan towards a larger war. What is this larger war? It's going to be with Lebanon and with Syria. And of course, Iraq will join this battle, and the resistance groups in there. And Yemen will intensify its attacks on American ships. We may finally actually see these ships sinking. So that's this stage that we're gonna walk into in the next 4 days. It will be the non-state actors, resistance axis non-state actors versus the US, the UK, and Israel. And this will go on for 4 to 5 months, just like this first phase that we saw. And the numbers of dead will be at least 10 times what we already have seen. In days, we will reach hundreds of thousands of people dead. And if the war doesn't end at this stage, before the American elections come, then we will see a direct war between Iran and the United States.
Um, I want to ask you something else about that. Oh, let's just say, for the sake of argument, this goes on and we don't have the expansion in Iran or whatever. This thing, okay, whatever the case may be. I got an article right here. Let me show everyone, and I think this is of consequence, and it leads us to our next conversation. Starbucks is laying off thousands of workers in the Middle East in response to Gaza boycotts. They're cutting thousands of jobs at their coffee shops because of a challenging work environment as the chain grapples with boycotts over the brand relating to Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. Okay. Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza, as they put it, Israel's genocide. Okay. When I look at Israel, I just think to this, it's over. It's over, because they don't have at this point a real economy. You know, the things are closed down. Any factories, all the tech, everything's closed down. They're sending people to their, calling people up to send them to wars. Many of them are getting injured, etc. A lot of people who are from other countries are just saying, "I'm out of here," and they're coming back to Brooklyn or Paris or wherever the case may be. The people in the region are not going to do business if it's not just in the region. I was reading where there was complaints in, I believe, Germany, because they had to package dates coming from Israel because the people were complaining and people were complaining because they said, we don't want to buy those. So if you can't sell your stuff worldwide, if you can't do business in the region, if the people have left, it looks like there was always the Israel argued, oh, the Muslims are going to come in and they're going to kill us all. It looks like they've committed economic suicide. What does Israel look like after this mess?
Yeah, I mean, they already, according to their own numbers, lost almost half of the foreign investment in the country. And there hasn't been any foreign investments coming in or people since this war started. There is no more Israel. Even if this war stops right now, we go back to the option of them accepting a ceasefire. Well, Ramadan is coming. Everybody's going to see them beat up worshippers. It's going to inflame more feelings. Most probably, Gaza will fire again at them. It's so. All their leadership is their names are in the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. In fact, there was yesterday somebody that filed a case against the Prime Minister of Australia at the ICC as being supportive of war crimes or aiding and abetting war crimes. Yesterday, Palestinian Canadians filed a case against the Foreign Affairs Minister of Canada for the continued sale of weapons to Israel as, again, aiding and abetting genocide. So, no matter what happens tomorrow, Israel is done for. There will not be a Zionist colony in the land of Palestine. There may, Jews may live there, but we will not have anymore a Jewish state or a colony there. Whether it's gonna take another 10 years of slow collapse, or a very fast collapse of internal feuding. Look, if the war stops, Netanyahu is gone. But will the Smoleriches and the Ben Gvirs stop? They're not going to stop. They have now their own militias. They built their own armies on the ground in the West Bank. They have the fanatics that are singing Kumbaya at the entrances of Gaza to block the aid. Imagine singing Kumbaya while you're blocking aid from going into Gaza. So the internal war inside Israel, will start without somebody even starting a war on them from the outside. Their isolation from the world, it's going to all lead to the end of Israel. There's no more Israel. October 7th was, the stamp of the end of Israel. Is just how bloody, how fast. Those are all questions we'll see the answers to, depending on how the Israeli elite deal with the situation. The more fighting they open up, the Israelis, the faster their collapse is going to be. And I see from the way that Netanyahu and all his government are acting, and the way that Biden and the Western elite are acting, there's no possibility of ceasefire, and we're going to a bloodbath. That's how Israel is going to end.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. It looks, you can't operate a country without an economy. And you can't have an economy if people won't buy your stuff, won't do business with you. Not just that, they won't do business with companies that will do business with you. If they won't do business with companies that will do business with you, they sure as hell ain't going to do business with your companies. So not only is Israel going to suffer severe economic pain, the companies that would desire to do business with him will be forced to abandon them, or they'll go out of business. I'm sure the Middle East now is starting to see the McDonald's, all of those things are just pretty much empty, aren't they?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, look, for a long time, the boycott movement in the Arabic world was a state-run thing in the 70s. The state
Yeah.
forces blockade and doesn't allow these products to come in. Well, now we have in these countries collaborationist regimes with the West, but the people themselves are refusing to buy these products without being compelled to do, without being forced to do, which is even more significant, number one. Number two is that the rise of Chinese products and their quality and so forth is compelling people also to, because they can find an alternative to anything that comes from the West, to buy a Chinese. The only thing right now that the West is maintaining sales for is brands that are luxury brands. For now, at least, people don't see an alternative to Chanel or an alternative to BMW. Not yet, okay. But as soon as we get to this point, we already have, you have this feeling within not only the Arabic populations, people in Africa, people in Latin America, people in Asia are sick and tired of the supremacist attitude that the West has against the rest of humanity, and would love to not do trade, would love to even not consume media from the West. Although it's a little bit hard to let go of all the American TV production. It's a lot of fun to watch that if you put away a little bit the propaganda that they have in it. But the point is, we're even in the terms of media production, we're getting to a point of quality parity happening with the Chinese or Korean or Iranian media is becoming close to in parity with the West. So for now, the only thing that is the West is safe with is their cultural production. Everything else, they're losing the edge on. And one of the driving forces for this shift to consumption of products from other countries is the despicable support for genocide in Palestine. It's hastening the end of Western economic domination of the world.
Let me ask you this, your thoughts. I know you cover a lot of stuff. Europe, Macron, and we're starting, Macron, oh, we've got to go send troops to Ukraine. A number of other European leaders were immediately like, oh, no, we don't. Now, here's what's interesting. If we really look at it, it'd be like me seeing Mike Tyson and saying, look, I got to go over there and jump in the ring with him. That's one punch. You know what I mean? And I'm flying out of the ring like a pigeon. That would be absurd. Now, people could look at me and say, boy, Garland, he really wants to fight Mike Tyson. But in reality, in the practical world, I wouldn't be able to actually go in there and fight him physically, kinetically, right? When we read all of these people in Europe saying we're out of ammo. We don't have anything to send. We've only got a couple tanks left. We've sent them all. The British, literally, they're holding their submarines together with crazy glue. For God's sake, their stuff's falling apart. Their equipment's breaking. It's not working. They're running out of it. Physically, they don't have the soldiers and the equipment to send there. Why do you think Macron's talking this talk? What do you think this is all about?
Once in a while, one of the dogs has to bark. You have them all in a kennel. So, you can't really hate him for that. I mean, he has to speak like he runs an army, he runs a country. Ultimately, it's also, there's rules given to these leaders that are within the American empire. There's also internal bickering between them. The German versus the UK versus France about who is more useful to master in DC, and who is more tough against the enemies of master in DC. And so you'll see that competition. They'll even sometimes out each other for things that are harmful to all of them, just because of this internal bickering, who's going to be closer to the kitchen and or the toilet of master in the house. So they, we saw last week how the Germans outed the UK having some advisors on the ground or soldiers, and then we saw the French do something. So this is the context of it. Ultimately, the German army hasn't fought a war since World War II. The French have only fought colonial wars against unarmed civilians in Africa. The British have to hide behind the coattails of their bigger brother in DC, and all these countries have huge internal problems. They cannot face off Russia, and definitely they can't do anything without approval of Washington, D.C.
Let me ask you this. I have some friends in Africa who are very much paying attention to the Ukraine conflict, seeing it as someone from their perspective, as they said, it's about time someone fought back against the US empire, against US imperialism. They're like cheerleaders. They got Russian flags. They're very big fans now of Vladimir Putin. I have friends in Africa that used to ask, I do a show on Sputnik. Well, with the Russians, what do you think? And now they're 100%. They're all in. They're like Putin fan. They're like watching the sports and saying, yeah, go in with. They want the Russians to win. I think they see a loss by the U.S. empire, a victory in Ukraine as the end of U.S. imperialism, as the end of the U.S.'s domination. How is that the Ukraine versus the Russia? And again, from this perspective, Russia's took on every. I mean, man, that really takes some guts. They took on everybody: the U.S., France, the whole West, and they seem to be stomping them into the ground. A pretty amazing feat, if you ask me. But at any rate, that's me. How is that conflict viewed in the Middle East through the context of U.S. imperialism, U.S. hegemony being challenged?
Yeah, I mean, looking at Africa, of course, we saw the uprising and the coup in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Niger, and the help that Russia gave those countries to rid themselves of French and American occupation. Yesterday, the president of Burkina Faso, pointed out, there was a terrorist attack, an attempt of infiltration from Nigeria to Burkina Faso that are ISIS, chameleon contras, I would call them, that are clearly American and French backed. And the Burkina Faso military was able to defeat them and make sure that they don't enter the country. All these countries and all their people have been under French occupation for more than a century prior to this, and they've seen what the West has to offer. And now they see Russia, beating the hell out of France, Germany, the UK, and the US in Ukraine. Of course, they're cheering it because it means that if somebody can beat this combined power of the West alone, well, then there's possibilities for people to liberate themselves in Africa. And I think I would say Gaza right now, today, and the war on Gaza is showing that you don't have to be Russia to be able to beat the West. I mean, this is a concentration camp blockaded from all sides, and a fighting force of around 20,000. That's all that Hamas's fighting force is. 20,000 fighters are able to hold Israel and all the West behind it into a standstill. Okay, so this is an achievement, a military achievement that hasn't been heard before, and it inspires other peoples around the world to follow suit. One last thing I would say about Gaza and this military formula that we're seeing. I mean, they dropped almost 6 Hiroshimas now on Gaza. I mean, the Japanese took their pants down and bent over the minute one nuclear bomb fell over them. Yeah, they bent over for America immediately. Here is Gaza, 6 nuclear explosions later, and is refusing to surrender. That's also a change, historical change in the world. And we will see the effects of this battle in Gaza, just like we saw the effects of the battle in Ukraine and how it changed the whole landscape of military strategy and so forth. Right now, Gaza is writing new chapters in military sciences and how to defeat an empire with a 20,000 fighting force.
Well, what's interesting is this: we see different things. We see the U.S. empire and its vassals bring all of their military technology, military power up against Russia, and saying, okay, we got missiles and planes and all of the high-tech weaponry, and it's all getting smashed to pieces. I mean, whatever they send in next, Leopard tanks, whatever, and it's just getting dashed to pieces. Their soldiers are getting, massacred. I mean, this thing's a lopsided fight, clearly. So they're putting in their heavy weaponry and their technology, and it's getting smashed to pieces. Now, when they go to Gaza, they put in their soldiers. They're getting dashed to pieces by people who are just tougher fighters and who are more motivated. Then we go to Yemen. There's a combination thereof, where in Yemen, Ansar Allah they're tough fighters, and the world knows Ansar Allah. You don't want to tangle with those guys in a fight because they're up to the task. But they have acquired and/or made a certain level of weaponry that puts them in that middle range where they're not fighting on the ground, though they certainly would, but they have some weaponry that they can use, but they can hide it underground. There's no radar stations to hit. There's no high-tech things. There's no satellites to shoot down. They just can carry it around, fire it at their ships, and disappear it again. So we're seeing basically 3 different fighting styles. It's kind of like watching martial arts, where one guy's Aikido, the next guy's, Shotokan. We're seeing various fighting styles, all of them extremely effective against imperialism. That's got to be horrifying to U.S. imperialism, and it's got to be really make the world that's been oppressed happy, because they're seeing there's more than one way to skin a cat, that the U.S. empire is so vulnerable that it can be hit in different ways. It can be defeated. Your thoughts?
I'm gonna tell you a story. This is a true story. I lived in Saudi Arabia in my childhood. I lived in Riyadh, um, and this is a very funny story, but it's really true, and I hope our viewers are gonna like it. Um, I was a kid. We're walking in the old city of Riyadh. Uh, my father with me, and as we're walking on the sidewalk, a short, skinny Yemeni, that's what they are, short and skinny usually, is walking on the sidewalk and he bumps into a large football size Saudi from Najd. Najd is the region where Riyadh is. He just bumps into him. And the Najdi starts screaming racist uh, comments on the guy and, telling him you're a slave here, you work for us, stuff like that. And so I'm like, 7 years old, and I'm, hiding behind my dad, seeing this happen. And all of a sudden, this little short Yemeni, skinny guy, just lunges forward and grabs the Saudi from his balls and squeezes. And then he pulls down, forcing the Saudi guy to go down on his knees. Okay? And so the Saudi guy starts screaming, wailing, "Ah," and all the Saudis around start gathering. And so the Yemeni goes, anybody that gets close to me, I'm gonna pop his balls. Okay? And so all of them back up like this. And while he's still holding the guy from his balls, he takes off his leather sandals, the Yemeni guy, and he starts slapping the Saudi guy on his cheeks, da, 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 until blood starts spewing out of his cheeks. Okay? And at that moment of blood splatting out, I see the Yemeni guy just let go of the balls, put his foot on the Saudi guy's face, and jump over him and run like a rabbit, like a gazelle, okay? And all the Saudis couldn't catch the guy, okay? So this is Yemen. Yemen will take down somebody 4 or 5 times the size of it with the smallest thing, with his hands, with his sandal. He made that Saudi guy go to the ground. And I will never forget this image in my life. And this is what I know of Yemenis. You do not want to mess with a Yemeni. They are the nicest, most gentle people until you wrong them. And if you wrong them, oh, you better run.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine who lived in Saudi Arabia. This was long before all of this happened, when the war was going on. And he said, well, let me tell you, Garland, he said, the Saudis are scared to death of the people in Yemen. And this was like, I didn't know anything about him. He said, they carry these big knives all the time, right? He says, it's like, and they believe that everybody should have a gun, that every man should own a gun to protect his family, and they're tough. And he said, and just the Saudi, and what he said was this, the Saudis are very pampered. They're very, very pampered, and they got money, and they don't, they live well, and they tend to be, kind of fat and out of shape and not tough guys. And he said they're scared to death of the guys in Yemen. And a lot of them like drive taxi cabs, have various, working class kind of struggling jobs. He said, but the Saudis are scared to death of them. They see the Yemen guys and they just like give them distance because I guess I don't know, but this was before, years before all of this happened. That was the story that was told to me.
Oh yes. I mean, there's more weapons within Yemeni households than there is in the United States, by the way. But you definitely don't see shootings in high schools in Yemen.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, they are very strong, and they take this as a commandment from Prophet Muhammad. Teach your children how to archery and riding horses, and that in our modern times that means like how to fire a rifle and how to ride a tank. Okay, so this is a commandment. They see it as something that they have to do to stay sovereign and free of enslavement of countries like Saudi Arabia.
What do you think, if there is a broader war, Yemen's part would be in it? How would they be able to increase their, because I feel like now that Yemen's pulling his punches for what they're doing. I feel like they're pulling their punches. I feel like Yemen is being moderate, that they have the ability to be much stronger. I also feel that Saudi Arabia, UAE are doing everything they can to stay friendly with Yemen, to make sure that Yemen knows they're not in it, because Yemen could certainly strike their oil facilities if they chose to hurt the West. And they know how vulnerable they are. But what would you, outside of that, what do you see Yemen's part if there was a broader conflict, if a real serious conflict steps up?
Yeah, I definitely, if the bigger conflict breaks out, we will see them targeting and sinking Western military vessels in the region. We will see them also probably stop any oil shipments from moving. They will not target directly Saudi or Emirati oil facilities, but they will target their oil after it's been paid for by somebody else as it's moving. So they will enact a blockade on the West for oil if this war breaks out. And similarly, I think that their missiles and their drones can reach all the way to Sri Lanka. So they could stop all trade even going towards South Africa to the Cape of Good Hope if they wish to. And so those are options that are open to them. They don't need to enact them right now. They're already, doing enough for now that is entangling the whole navies of all of the West in their region, giving some breathing air for the Palestinians and the resistance axis in general. But if a war breaks out on a full scale, they could shut down all shipping going to Europe in all directions, and shipping of oil and gas from the region.
Wow. Well, Laith Marouf, certainly want to thank you for coming on again, and tell people about your great website, freepalestine.video, and the work that you're doing and how they can help to keep that work going.
Yes, please visit freepalestine.video, donate. We're training youth and building studios here in Lebanon for the students in the universities to be able to produce content in English, so you can hear what is happening here in Lebanon more directly.
freepalestine.video, and they can also, not only can you donate, you can set it up so you can be a monthly donor, and you can not just donate one. A lot of times people will say, well, I don't have that much, I can only give $10, I can only give $20. Well, that's fine. You can set it up to give $20, $10, $20 a month, and get what we used to call in the business community RMR, recurring monthly revenue. That's what really helps people keep going. So if you can do some RMR, recurring monthly revenue, at freepalestine.video, if you can go there, if you can find a way to give whatever you can give and to make it monthly, that would be a great way to help the people of Gaza, to help get the information out of the area in English. Thank you very much. Laith Marouf, thank you.